Hi, everyone. This is VA to VA. We're so glad you're with us this morning, and we're very excited about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about podcasts and how that can help your social media presence, SEO, and all of those wonderful things that we always fight for. And we have a wonderful guest with us, Colette Schultz, and she is from Savvy Subcontracting. We're going to let her do an intro in just a moment. But then we also have my partners in crime. And I'm Tammy with Tammy's Office Solutions. I'll let Lisa introduce herself, and then we'll go to Nanette.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kolb with Augusta Virtual Assistants out of Augusta, Georgia. I am a team owner and manager of Augusta Virtual Assistants. We have 6 on the team at the moment. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for viewing the recording if that's what you're doing later on. But yes, we have a full schedule today and want to jump right in and pick Colette's brain today.
Hi, I'm Nanette Telemack. I'm with In Essence Virtual Assistants out of Newbury, New Hampshire, and I'm owner and offer generalist services of sales, marketing, and administrative tasks to small businesses and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. And so, again, our topic today is podcasts and how that can help you. Podcasting and how they can help your business. What brings businesses closer to their customers is the ability to tell a great story about their brand. And content marketing is a great way to do this. And one of the best tools to use is a podcast for spreading your brand. And telling a story. The Pew Research Center in 2015 report says that advances in technology, in particular the rapid growth in use of smartphones and mobile devices, in addition to the increased ease of in-car listening, have contributed to the uptick of interest in podcasts. The percentage of Americans who have listened to a podcast in the past month has almost doubled since 2008, from 9% to 17% by January of 2015. The percentage listening in 2015 was up 2 points over 2014 levels, which is 15%. So that's a lot of people. And I know I listen to podcasts all the time, driving to work and going to driving to visit my family. So what are the advantages of podcasts? Well, podcasts are an easy consumable content format, and it doesn't require a person's undivided attention like video or text-based content does. By talking to your audience directly in your own voice, podcasts help you connect with your audience in a deeper and more personal level. You can bring in sponsors to create revenue from your podcasts. You can cover live events and conferences in new and interesting ways through your podcast interviews. So, as you can see, podcasts can be a powerful marketing tool, and we are thrilled to have Colette Schwartz with us to discuss how she got started using podcasts for her business and to delve into how she started. Welcome, Colette, to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome. So, I guess to start it, what is the purpose of starting a podcast for you, and what were you hoping to achieve by offering a series of podcasts to your audiences?
Okay. Well, I'll go back a little bit. It was actually 2006 that I started to want to be a virtual assistant. And I came across a podcast series actually with Kelly McCausey. Right now it's called Solo Smarts or Solo Masterminds. And she had multiple series of training, basically, how to do some technical things for a virtual assistant. So I listened to her podcast over and over and over. And that's really where I learned how to become a virtual assistant. And I was struggling trying to find clients for my virtual assistant business, and I actually came across a lady by the name of Diane Hess, and she brought me on board. And she brought me on board, but it was actually to provide services for her own clients, and that's when I decided to branch off into the subcontracting niche for other virtual service providers. But because of learning so much from podcast, I felt like there was kind of a a void in this system that nobody really talked about being a virtual assistant for other virtual assistants. So I thought I can do this, and sure enough, I believe it was Kelly, and then her name is Darlene. I can't think offhand what the last name is, but they actually taught how to do a podcast. So I basically taught myself, and I started it then. However, it was okay, but I wasn't consistent with it. And then just recently, because I've kind of been growing more and more, I decided in 2016 I really wanted to get that podcast up and running again. So now I have Virtual Team 360, and I interview podcast guests that have used the subcontracting niche in order to profit. So that's how and why the podcast was born, because I felt as though there was such a void and I could teach others how to use subcontracting.
It's interesting because you're really coming from the point of view where we are team leaders. You're coming from the point of view really from the team member, because you're helping people connect to virtual assistants who can be a part of a team, which is what we're talking about too. And I just find it interesting. But originally, when you started, the podcast to try and attract more clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. And at that time, I was just kind of learning more the technical side of it when I had my first podcast. But then this podcast, and I think that there's questions, I'll get into it later, how I helped brand this podcast series, because there was a little bit to that. But I do speak to the multi-VA or the multi-service provider that needs team members, but a team member can also learn quite a bit listening to the podcast. Listen to what those
absolutely
the leaders are trying to find in good team members.
Yeah, I have a question, Colette.
Absolutely, and just to tell everybody, we've all been guests on her show.
Yes,
and really enjoyed it. She reached out to all of us, and that was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and we thought, well, this will be great to bring her on to share with all of you, about podcasting and how it can help. I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, that's fine. I have a question. Now, how did you decide on what equipment, the microphone, software applications that work best for podcasts?
Right.
Research on that.
Well, I think I mentioned earlier there was a podcast series, How to Create a Podcast. Darlene actually helped me understand. I use Audacity. She did a YouTube video on how to use Audacity. So that was my first attempt to doing it. The first original podcast that I had, I used a program to host the audio files. I used Podbean. But just recently I've worked with...
What was the name? Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
It's called Podbean. And that one, basically, it's like a domain host, but it's for audios only. And then just recently, I have been last fall I worked with Denise Griffiths. She has a podcast called Your Partner in Success for virtual assistants. And she suggested using Blog Talk Radio. So that dashboard actually does the same thing as Podbean. I have lived and learned, and when my subscription is out from that, I think what I'm actually going to turn to is called Libsyn. That also is an audio host. Because the problem I have with Blog Talk Radio is it's kind of like Google Hangouts, where you have to go live and there's no means for being late, and I was just having major issues trying to bring guests on. So now what I do is I record it through Skype, and then I combine my intro to the Skype recording.
Yeah, Denise has been a guest of ours, so we know Denise quite well, and she does a really good job with her podcast, so I'm glad that y'all connected.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you say the costs involved in something like this then? Kind of run us through that too, like for any of the software, microphones, things of that nature to make it really work.
Right. Well, the first one, I didn't have much of a budget. So your Audacity is free. It will cost I recommend myself going on to Fiverr and having a voiceover do your intro to your podcast, and that I think I maybe spent $15 for somebody to do a nice intro for me. And then you've got the hosting of the audio file, which is actually the most expensive thing. Podbean, the original, I would say probably less than $60, $70 a year. But with Blog Talk Radio, what I find is it's truly a marketing program. So that was close to $200. And part of the reason I don't really care for that one is there's so much advertisement before your podcast even starts. And I think Libsyn, somebody had mentioned that that's less than $100 a year as well. So really, a podcast is very inexpensive to create.
So you said.
And what about hardware like microphone? Programs like that.
What I originally started out doing is just using my speaker on my computer, and that does not work well. So I just purchased this Logitech headset, and it's very clear. In the Skype as well, I just call the person and we do the recording. So
when you talked about using someone to edit a beginning, so you looked for an audio editor?
No,
a person has audio.
That was a voiceover to do the intro.
Voiceover.
So
Oh,
what they
nice.
do is they actually do background music, and then they do a little intro about your podcast.
Cool.
And hers is very nice. I don't know if you've heard it at all, but it's really rather nice. It's really good.
And the people that do those kind of know time frame. You don't want to have it super long. You just want to kind of be brief. But that was really one of the most fun things about getting the podcast up and going, because you get to pick the music, you get to pick the voice and things like that.
That's great.
And then you get the audio file to use it in other ways if you needed to for other broadcasts, correct?
Right. And right now, because I do it on Skype, there's a program called CallNote that connects with Skype. So that creates the audio file. So then I take the audio file and the intro audio file, and I combine those in Audacity and upload it to my website. Actually, I upload it to Blog Talk Radio first and then to the website.
So there's a lot of moving pieces, but it sounds like it's not too terribly complicated or expensive. Is that what you're saying?
Most definite. It takes, unfortunately, a little bit of trial and error, but I am kind of tech savvy, but I think just about anybody could try to figure it out. And I did have to listen to the training of the podcast that Kelly did a couple times before I got it, but yeah, it's definitely doable. And I love podcasts. I mean, to me, a podcast is like a book. Some people learn from a book. I don't. I learn. I'm a audio learner.
Hands-on.
Yep.
I love podcasts too because like Nanette was saying, you can have it in the background while you're working and everything else. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, whereas when I do some of my classes and stuff that I take, it's video and I'm there taking notes. I have to pay attention because I want to get it all in. But with a podcast, most of the time, you can just kind of have it in the background. You learn a lot still,
right.
But you can still go about most of your work depending on what it is.
Right. And that's actually a really good point, too. The other thing that is connected to a podcast is I just recently brought on a ghostwriter for my show notes, because kind of probably what you guys do, too, as the guests bring up different programs and things like that, or different sites, having somebody be able to do show notes. So if you are listening to it while you're doing the dishes or whatever, you don't have to take those notes. You can go back to the site and pull those links up.
Awesome.
That's a good point. And we often do try to put, like, we'll put your link on the program on the event page, as
right.
well as hopefully any of the links you discussed. Maybe you can send them to us and we'll put them on.
Sure.
And YouTube also does transcription automatically. However, it's not perfect. We're not at the point just yet where we're hiring somebody to do that transcribing work for us yet. But a lot of people who are really big into videos, podcasts, and all that, they have people actually transcribe whole programs so that people can have the notes and things like that. I know I'm doing inbound marketing certification right now, and I can for that. I mean, it's the transcription, so they had to have somebody do it word for word, you know. And
Right.
that's really, it comes back down to, what level are you going to be at, and once you go to a certain level, then there's certain more expectation, I think, as well from your guests, and
Right.
as well as your followers.
Yeah. And I did actually have a transcriptionist on my podcast, so he might be a good one for that when you get to that point. Or he has a team.
Great. That's good to know. Great to know.
Well, I know we had a great time. Each one of us has participated in a podcast, Colette, and the way you conducted it and the answers, questions you asked and everything, it was great. And each of us had a wonderful time participating in that. Now, when you do an interview with a virtual assistant, you put that link up on your website after, a month or so, correct?
Correct. I usually try to upload 2 podcasts a month, and then I try to link to the guest. I've also just recently started what they call I'm calling a media kit, so I can send that to my guest. So then my ghostwriter actually creates like 5 to 10 tweets. So then I'd say, this is what I'm going to tweet. If you want to share this with your audience, please do so as well, because then it can reach a bigger audience.
And what is your website? Tell us your website, where others can the link.
My website is savvysubcontracting.com, and I was wondering, actually, I did put it up here in the show notes or the chat, but I don't know if it's going to show up. But savvysubcontracting.com, and if you go up to podcast, the podcast is actually called Virtual Team 360. And I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about the names of the podcasts, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked with Denise Griffiths, she was kind enough to coach me through getting the podcast up and running the right way. And of course, I wanted to have the word subcontracting in it because that's my niche, but she didn't say no, but she kind of directed me. She said, why don't you do it a little bit broader, but yet within the niche that you have. So we came up with Virtual Team 360 to kind of brand it towards that. And, trying to get a name for your business is often hard, and trying to get a name for the podcast is really difficult too. And I look back at the name of my business that I started out with, and I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking. So I don't know if you guys had a difficult time trying to come up with your first business name or not.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I had like pages of names, and I would read them off to the family, and even some clients said, what do you think about this? And I still go through it sometimes.
Yeah.
I even have another domain that I was thinking of breaking off into with some of the things I do.
Right, and actually that's part of the reason Denise suggested that. She says you can branch off with Virtual Team 360. You don't have to just do the podcast, which made more sense to me too. So.
Yeah, she's a wealth of information.
Did you guys have trouble with it?
What? With naming your
Lisa,
business?
Did you have trouble naming?
Yeah. I did. It's you're racking your brain constantly, like trying to think of being broad, but also encompassing everything that you're trying to get out there. So it's hard. It's not easy, and so I know some people hire people to help them with that, but when you're starting out and you don't have any budget, you really have to think for yourself.
Right. And one other thing I've seen people do too is they actually do a domain name with their actual name, like ColetteSchultz.com, and then what they do is they branch off, and that's not the worst idea, I guess, but I was always kind of iffy about having my name out there, but now obviously I want my name out there. So
Yeah, that's the problem. if you're trying to brand yourself and reach as many customers as possible, you can't worry about, well, you can put fail safes and but you have to put your name out there.
Right.
It's I used to worry about what comes up, and I do monitor that when I Google my name or my business. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there. That's the only way you're going to get customers and people to know who you are.
Right. Yeah.
Did you find any stumbling blocks? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I come at it and I tell my kids too that when I'm online, I have no premise of privacy. Like, I know, especially since starting a business, that people are going to be looking me up. People are going to be, you know what I mean? And so I don't consider, I mean, there's certain fail-safes, of course, but, who I am is who I am. And even though my business is a part of that, doesn't mean I'm always, on that. But we all know as business owners, it seems like, 24/7. But I just tell my kids, when you're online, there's no sense of privacy anymore in any way. And when you own a business, that's really true.
Right. And I have to admit too, today, part of the reason I do podcasts is because I don't like my face on video. So for me to come on here, I'm like, okay, I can do this. I don't care about my voice, but the pictures or the videos is a tough one.
It's very personal, but that's for sure. I wasn't sure I was going to like it.
Yeah. But it's good, too, because I think that it gives people a sense of security to see your face, to know who you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it sounded like you went through some stumbling blocks. Oh.
Well, thank you. I need to hear that. My husband doesn't tell me very often.
Oh. If you had to do it all over again, like what changes would you have made? What would you have researched into or done differently?
I guess I actually did kind of start over, and the couple of the main things were the intro. I didn't realize those existed before I started the first podcast. The hosting of the audio files obviously was another one. And the other thing too that a person needs to do in order to get a podcast up is get a logo for that podcast. And for the life of me, I'll try to find the link for you or the name of the company, but it's called logonerds.com, because I'm not a graphic designer, and they are, I would say, maybe $30 to create the logo for the podcast. But that was one thing that I felt like I struggled with, because the original logo I had was kind of silly. And now I really like the one that I have. So
I do too.
So yeah, I guess it would be the intro, the hosting of the audio, and then making sure that you get the logo to brand along with your other services and products.
So in terms of hosting, do you mean like where to house your audio?
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you find was the best way to house that? Because that can probably eat up a lot of space.
It can. Well, I'm going to be on my third try, and I'm going to try lip-sync, because that's what a lot of people are suggesting. Like I said, Blog Talk Radio is okay, and I think it's very marketable, but I don't care for the advertisements that happen before your podcast. I don't want people thinking that, I'm being salesy about that, and I'm not able to pick those advertisements that come on. So,
how did your audience change, Colette, once you started doing the podcast? And I know you changed different platforms, things like that. But once you started doing it, how did the followers grow? How did all that change and transition for you?
Well, the other thing I did when I had my original is I did live. I did Eventbrite, and I was trying to promote it as a live, like they had to be on the call with me. Well, this time I actually just record them, and I've created my social network. So I have LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and I've gotten a lot better about being consistent with promoting the podcast, so I have more followers. The other thing I do is I put it on iTunes. So now I have my own iTunes page with the podcast. So I think it was just a matter of how I promoted it was lacking on the first try.
That is wonderful.
So,
yeah,
so it sounds
I think one of the things that we're talking about is, go ahead. I think one of the things that we're trying to talk about too is how podcasting can influence your digital marketing, your social media, and all of that. And I'm sure that you've seen considerable growth since doing the podcast compared to before you started that. Can you tell us a little bit about how much it's grown and why you think that is?
Well, I think the biggest thing is consistency. And the other thing I try to do with the social networks, and before when I tried to start my virtual assistant, you can get so lost in social networking. You can do Google Hangouts, you can do 10 different things, but my magic number is number 3. So I chose 3 networks that I'm gonna specifically hone in on, and just by being involved with discussions, don't just promote your podcast. And I have to share a little bit of a story. Is there was a forum that I didn't realize. I'm like, okay, well, here's my podcast, but I didn't get involved with the discussions. I got kicked off the forum, and I was embarrassed. I was just plain embarrassed, but I just didn't know. I'm like, well, I thought that's how you actually get your name out there, but it's not that way. It's getting involved with the discussions, asking questions, and you might know something very little, but that helps somebody else. So I think that is a huge key, is to try to answer some of those questions that people have.
Yeah, the engagement, building that relationship really does boost your credibility, and then it boosts your visibility, because once they get to know you and find out what you're about and why you do what you do, and we found that out doing this, then you do have more, engagement. They're more open to what you're offering, and they're more willing to learn from it and things like that. So you're right, the engagement really helps, because, we can post little positive sayings, but, it is social media, and it is about the relationships, and in business, the relationships tend to win over the skills.
Right. Yeah, most definite. That is
and
always.
It builds trust as well.
Yep.
You have to have trust to do business with people, and because if they don't trust you, then they're not going to. So as you build, and talk and interact with people, it's building that trust factor as well.
Right. And that's one question that I always ask my podcast guests too, about the skills. And so many of them say that they would definitely hire a subcontractor if they've got the ability to engage versus the skill. They can train them on the skill. So yeah, that is important.
Yeah, and it sounds like you could use, deciding on how to use a podcast could be very there's a wide variety of uses. I mean, if you want to, for me, it sounds like if you want to get say the word out in your skills, going out and saying I'm good at this, I'm good at that, means nothing. But if you use a podcast to maybe train somebody on a particular software, to review, to talk about how to handle, like what we do, like handle certain aspects of your business. These are all ways of showing your skill levels and your expertise that can benefit. You're not only you're promoting yourself by teaching.
Correct. And the other thing to remember too is, let's say you just don't have time to do a podcast because they are very time consuming, but offer to be a guest on a show. That's big. I mean, that's, you don't have to do that all the time, but you could do it every 6 months, but offer to be a guest on a podcast. And if you are a multi-VA firm, I'm willing. I need some guests, so please, let me know.
I was just going to ask you, do you need guests?
I definitely do.
I was just going to ask that question. So, and what type of guest are you looking for, Colette? So people know.
What I'm looking for is the virtual service provider, and yes, we can call them virtual assistants, but I don't want to limit it to that. But those service providers that have a team that do their clients' work, I want to, kind of get their expertise about how they are using the subcontracting to profit. So it would basically be somebody that has a team, and it could be one person on their team, but somebody that's doing that client work. Those are the people I'm looking for as guests.
Well, we will definitely keep our eyes and ears open for opportunities as we network with other team owners and managers, and they want to have an opportunity to tell others in a different forum other than just social media, or blogging, or things like that. We will definitely send them your way, because like I said, we had a great time participating with you ourselves.
Right. And a couple of the guests that I am going to be having on board are like Tanya Sutherland. She's from VA Networking. Yeah. She's one of them. Denise actually is going to be a guest, because I think she has a very large team of people that help her with her client work. So it should be kind of exciting. But yeah, please do send them my way.
Absolutely. We'd be happy to. Yeah. And I want to know when Denise is interviewed, because that's news to me that her team has grown. It used to be just her and Ben.
Okay.
So if she,
she has a large team now.
That would be great to know. And I saw pictures on Facebook. She recently did a local expo and had some huge coffee mugs up there to give away. And I asked her where she got those made, and she sent me the link. And
I want to see the link too.
Tanya,
all right, Lisa, you have to put it up on the page.
Yeah, right. Tanya has been in the business for a good while, and so she would be someone good as well. And we'll go back into our guest list. We usually try to, encompass the team leaders, team owners, managers to interview. So we'll go back in our guest list and give you the list of people that may be interested in it as well.
Sure. And talking about having guests, that is one of the tasks too. I don't know if it's so much a struggle, but you have to, get a system down for scheduling. Well, first finding the guest, and scheduling the guest, following up with the guest. That is time consuming itself.
And also, what the topic is, right? And getting the questions down and all that. That's
in that I've got basically a standard list of questions. So the topic is they're usually doing some other type of service. Like I have one transcriptionist, I had one website designer. It's just a different type of service that they're providing. So.
Okay.
I think that going back in some of our HOAs too would probably help you, just to see, because we do have guests on, like yourself and like others who are like us doing multi VA companies, and so that might be an option for you as well, and just connecting with same, but going back and seeing some of those might help too.
Right.
For you, Colette, as well. We love to help connect people, and it's great when we can do that. I feel like our community is more about collaboration, which I truly love. Rather than competition, it's about collaboration, and I really love that fact.
Right. Now, what about sponsorship? That is something that I'm looking into, but on your Google Hangouts, you don't hear much about sponsorship, but I know that with podcasts you can have sponsorship.
You mean, but if you do, is that a way for them to advertise through your, sponsored by
Correct
company?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
That may be helpful for that's sort of like an alliance to market.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, because the Blog Talk Radio is a fee, and you have overhead to do your podcast, whereas Google Hangout does not cost us anything.
Right.
So we haven't looked into sponsorship, but that is a great idea.
Right. And that's something that I've actually we can talk later, but maybe even VA to VA, you guys could be my sponsor. And, the thing is, the overhead isn't that big, but it's enough to be a win-win for both of us.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. The thing that a lot of people use the Google Hangouts for, the HOAs and all of that, is just to get themselves out. And so that, like we said before, because the more that people see you, hear you, and all of that, the more and interact with you, the more they're going to trust you. And hopefully maybe they'll see something that they think, well, I need that service, or I'd like to do business with them, and that kind of thing. So it ends up being, even though we really started this to help other companies, there was nothing out there that was helping anybody who was starting a multi-virtual assistant or multi-virtual service company. And so the three of us got together and talked about it, and then eventually did form this so that we could help others, because there really was no information out there about how to do that. Now, we do have some exciting things coming up. We're working on some things. We have a website now, and we do have some really exciting things coming up that will be promoted once we are ready to promote them. But so that's, I think, a lot of times what people use HOAs for, rather than the other. But, all of us, have to market and make money somehow in order to do what we do, so that we can help others.
Right. I think it would be a really fun partnership to having a sponsor.
Well, we complement each other. So when I and I understand that, because when I worked in the technology realm and selling technology, one of my jobs was as a strategic alliance person, was to go out and see complementary products or services that we could both use to promote our products, and so these other companies, we would start an alliance, because together it made what we offer more powerful. So
right.
Yeah. So that makes sense too.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a new, I don't have any experience when it comes to the alliance, and one of the reasons I started my podcast too is because right now I work outside the home as a school district bookkeeper, and I love what I do, but my true dream is to be at home full time. So podcast actually isn't one of the services I provide, but by keep repeating that, the services that I do offer, I'm hoping that I can just get another project manager that I can provide services for as well. So that was the other intention for the podcast, is so I could pick up some clients to do some service work.
Has it helped you in that area? Have you picked up
Actually,
clients?
yes, it has. There was
good.
There's a bookkeeping client, and she said that she's seen my posts and things on the podcast. So yes, it has.
Well, there you go. This is success right there.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And that's another reason why this could be a good venue for people who want to get the word out about their company. What do you suggest? They start small, maybe once a month or something, or should they? How do they start? How would somebody start? I mean, from the beginning, like ideas and
for
equipment.
A podcast, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, my first suggestion is, rather than doing your own podcast, I would become a guest on somebody else's podcast. I would start from there, see if you even, like that ream of things. The second thing is get a purpose or a goal that you want to accomplish by doing the podcast. And once you establish that goal, things are just going to kind of come into place, I think.
I would think that the next step, I guess, once you have that purpose, would be to then investigate the different technology to actually implement it,
right,
like you did, right? So.
Yep. And I would also recommend going to Kelly McCausey's site and going through her training of the podcast series. I'm not a trainer when it comes to podcasts. I don't mind doing the podcast, but that's not my expertise. So I would find somebody like Kelly McCausey or Denise Griffiths who does specific podcast training.
If you can provide those names and sites, that we'll be able to put up for our listeners too.
Sure,
that'd be great.
Yep.
Okay, that's wonderful.
And you might have to listen.
Also, if anybody's listening, I'm sorry. If anybody's listening right now, and we have viewers out there, if you want to post questions or comments, please do, because we love doing that as well. We love live interaction, so please post your comments and questions, and we'll be sure to ask those and talk about them.
Did you have like stage fright when you were starting out?
Actually,
oh, you did?
Which kind of surprised me, because I do not. I've gotten better actually as an adult speaking in front of people, but no, it wasn't too bad at all. And I don't like my voice to begin with. I've got a coworker at work, and she's definitely got a radio voice, not me, but that did not bother me.
Yes, you do. Your voice is fine.
Thank you. There's 7 girls in our family. We don't have any brothers, and when we were younger, we never sounded or looked alike. Well, now as we're getting older, we can't even tell each other's voices apart. That's amazing.
Well, at least you don't have a southern twang like mine.
Well, that's kind of fun, though.
See, all of us like our own voices. That's just part of it.
Yeah,
I know
right.
if I ever listen back on these, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, right.
I don't particularly like my voice either, but and it kind of annoys me when I listen to myself. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, this
we all
video
feel
is
that way.
me.
Yeah, but what I have to say is that when I was I had a very heavy Brooklyn accent because till I was 13 I was raised in Brooklyn, and when we were moving to Colorado, my father had all of us sit in front of a tape recorder, with the reels, the old-fashioned kind, and we had to read books and correct ourselves until we lost it, which was the best thing he could have done.
Wow.
That's funny.
So yeah, and that's something that if someone is prepping to do this, if someone's prepping to do this and want to make sure that they're that they speak clearly, and I'm sure it's pacing yourself too. I mean, I think in the beginning I would talk too fast, and I had to learn to just slow down, and and it was probably out of nervousness, but to be able to present and speak to people, you have to think about how to enunciate slowly, carefully. When you're trying to promote yourself or speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other
That's a good point.
It is, because the other thing, though, I do is I want people to realize that I'm just an average person. We live on a farm. I never did, I think, that I would be into the technology like I am, but I don't edit my podcast. Some people do, but I don't, because I want people to realize, if my kid comes in screaming, Mom, I got to tell you something, that's okay. I'm a mom. So, and I know everybody has a different opinion on that, but that is what it is.
Yeah, I think we have to be real and approachable too, or people aren't going to listen to us or hear us or put us on a pedestal that we will quickly fall off, or at least I know I will. So, I think we do have to be real and genuine.
Right.
I also think that being real and genuine is really well. When we did marketing in the past, that was part of one of the things that they said, being authentic, because then people trust you better. That you're just an average person like them with a skill set that can help, and and so trying to pretend to be something you're not is not to your advantage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have one podcast that I forgot to turn off the ringer on my phone, and it rang, and I just, I apologized when I was on podcast, and I just turned it down then. But like I said, things like that do happen.
Yeah. Well, we have all kinds of technical difficulties often on here.
No, you don't.
We've started late. We've had no talking. All kinds of things. Kind of like this morning, our viewers don't know But before we went on, I mean, nobody could hear me 2 minutes before. So you just have those things when you do it live, that's for sure.
Right.
So I would think taping it would be nice and kind of almost bring the level of anticipation down that you don't have to, because you're not live, even though you're going to still play that.
Yes.
I would think it helps.
It did, because I think that added actually anxiety to me when I did do it live, because, and also too, if you don't have a caller on there, there were some nights where it was just me, but just like my podcast, but it just felt like, nobody's on here, and it's just kind of intimidating. So that's another reason I like podcast.
Yeah, I mean, actually, if you're training, if you're offering a training course or something, or talking about something, I mean, it's not necessary to be live, and maybe to your benefit, so you can edit, maybe something you missed a part that you should have added, you could do that, and no one's the wiser. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. It sounds like there's just a lot of advantage to doing podcasts, and that it certainly is a great marketing tool for you, and it can be for many of our listeners, especially multi-BA companies. I would think that for people like you who don't want to be in front of and do a video necessarily, but a podcast might be a really great option. I know I was really nervous about doing HOAs too, because I don't like to talk in front of people, but I have to do it more and more. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that I really enjoy doing this. That was a surprise to me. And but I would think for those who do get nervous in front of, say, a camera or anything like that, a podcast would be a good alternative to put out, because everybody's talking video for social media and views and things like that. But podcasts are also very popular.
Right. And, you guys probably have it too, but I have certain podcasts that I listen to whenever their episode comes out. I'm listening to it right away. And I hope that I will have that too. I hope that people are waiting for my podcast to be uploaded to my website.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I know we tend to get more. We tend to get more views after on YouTube, because a lot of people are working, and the BAs, may have client work and other things going on, but then they'll come back and view it on YouTube, which is really nice, and we always appreciate it.
Yeah. Or they're on the other side of the world.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
We always appreciate it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can you just recap how you promote different avenues and venues, social media sites maybe, that you'd use to promote once you have your podcast?
Oh, sure. Well, like I said, actually start with the guest. Use your guest, and create some tweets and give them what you're going to send to your audience, and then it's kind of double duty. They're helping promote to their clients, you're promoting to yours. The other thing is, I actually use the program Hootsuite, that I can schedule those tweets out, or those posts, to the three main ones which I use. And you don't have to use those, but those are Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I have a Facebook page. And then also I have a LinkedIn group, which is called Virtual Subcontractors Advice Group, and I promote it whenever I upload the file. I'll say the newest recording is out and ready to replay. So the consistency of that is what I do.
I would think the consistency is the hardest part.
It is.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I actually lost both parents within 3.5 months, which the one we kind of expected it. But anyways, I cannot believe how unfocused. I think it was just part of the grieving process, but it's finally coming back, and I'm kind of excited for it. But I was not consistent, and I was all over the board.
Yeah, my husband lost his parents within 6 months of each other in the same year, about 3.5 years ago. His mother in March and his dad in October. His mother had a massive heart attack. It was sudden. And his dad was diagnosed with cancer the following month. Mm-hmm. So I can relate to you there, and there's just a whirlwind of stuff going on, and it's like the world stopped. It really is. So I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
And
it
your
is
world
coming
stops.
back.
Everybody else keeps going, and your world
Yeah.
just kind of stops and
Right.
stands still for you. And I think everybody expects that. It's very normal. I mean, we're just going through that now with my husband having lost his father 3 months ago, and he just went down to see his mom again. And it's just a very, very difficult thing when you start losing parents. I lost my dad 5 years ago, and my mother's living with us now.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
you know, it's very, very difficult when we go through these changes in life, and I think people expect that and also probably forgive when you're not quite there during
Right.
those times if they understand. And if, again, being authentic and real and genuine and saying, look, this is what I'm going through. So it might be a little inconsistent right now, but I'll be back.
Right.
You know, and so I think that's a common thing, and I think we just have to tell our followers, you know, this is what's going on. And some people just shouldn't put the personal in with the business.
Right.
But I think it's a fine line, and I think it's a fine mix. You don't have to go into all the details. You can certainly say, you know, I'm grieving, or I'm, you know, had a loss, and so it's going to be a little bit.
Yep.
Absolutely. Now, Colette, what is your Facebook page? I was looking for you, and all I found was your profile.
Right.
Is it Savvy Subcontracting?
No, go to Virtual Team 360 because that's the podcast. Virtual Team 360.
Virtual Team 360.
Yep.
You're going to put all those links up on our page for us, so
Sure.
everybody can have them. If you'll put your Virtual Team 360, your Savvy Subcontracting, as well as the programs you discussed and the person who helped train you, or was the podcast you listened to begin, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
And you want me just to put it in the chat here, or just email it to you guys?
Not
if you
here,
email it, yeah.
Or, if you put it.
Yeah, I think emailing it is great because then I can have put it on a resource page of our website.
Okay.
That would work great.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and like I said, don't get that confused. The podcast is actually on my site, Savvy Subcontracting. It just happens that the podcast is called Virtual Team 360. And on Facebook, here's a kind of another interesting thing is I belong to a small town, and I had to do a lot of work to get to where I am today. And I call them nosy rosies. So I don't mix my personal with my business on Facebook, and that's why I did my own page, Virtual Team 360. And, you know, that might be an opinion that somebody else thinks that they should, you know, but I just don't mix the two.
I think that's great advice. I don't think anybody really should do that. You know, I try to separate my Facebook page from my work pages. They're just two separate things, and that's to protect yourself. You know, you should have your private life should be autonomous. Yeah.
It's a fine line where we put ourselves out there as a person, but at the same time, not everybody has to know all our personal things. And the things that bug me about Facebook, talking about Facebook, is that you can't join a group as your business. You have to join it as your personal.
Right.
That bugs me because then everybody within that group has my personal link now.
Right.
You know, and they don't know my business necessarily.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that's
why
really bugs me.
I highly recommend LinkedIn because that is the opposite. It's business is business.
Yeah.
So I like LinkedIn before I do Facebook, actually.
Now on LinkedIn, you just have your name, Colette Schultz, virtual assistant. Is that correct, or do you have a business account on LinkedIn as well?
I don't have a business account, but I do have a group called Virtual Subcontractors Advice Group, and I will send you that link. We've got about 5,000 people on that group as well. So, yeah.
That's a lot. That's great.
It is. And it's that because I've got the word subcontractor in there. I've got it from multiple service industries. Not just virtual assistants, but so.
And I think that's great because one of the things I find is that we could become too siloed, where we're all talking to each other, and that's great, but we're not talking to our potential customers. So a lot of these groups are very centric to other VAs, but I don't see that helping us get the word out to the small businesses, all the many small businesses are out there, and getting them to hear us and know about us.
Right. And
That's
I know
why
they
it's
say
so important to join some of those other groups within LinkedIn and Facebook and Google Plus and all of that. You really need to join groups that aren't virtual assistant, that they have to do with whatever your potential client might be, whatever your buyer persona, as they say, is. You want to join groups like that.
Because like one of the clients that I do subcontracting work, she's a marketing service provider. She doesn't call herself a virtual assistant, but I do her clients' work. So that's a perfect example. It's not just a VA, it's a virtual service provider.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, I just tried to look up Virtual Subcontractors Advice Group on LinkedIn and didn't find it. So I'll be looking for your email so we can post it.
Okay, that sounds good.
I think it's virtual subcontracting, right? Or savvy subcontracting on
No,
LinkedIn. Is that right?
Not the group isn't.
Oh.
Let me just pull it up here.
Oh, what is that?
I have Virtual Subcontractors Advice Group. Now, I have subcontractors as one word. Is that two words?
No, I just have one.
Okay. Because I want to join them.
Yeah, it's Virtual Subcontractors Advice.
It's ADVICE.
ADVICE.
Well, we have just a few minutes left, ladies. So any last remarks that anybody want to point out before we have to say goodbye?
I would say don't, jump in on something like that if you want to try it, and we'll be happy to post up Colette's links and trainers that she had in the past, equipment. I happen to have bought myself a microphone with one of those round things for noise reduction. I was thinking a long time ago of doing that. It's actually gathering dust under my desk, but I may, take a chance and try to think of something.
You should use it for this.
I know.
A lot of people use it for HOAs, actually. I was told I had to get a professional mic.
Oh. Well, I got it on Amazon. It wasn't cheap. I mean, it wasn't expensive. It was pretty cheap. So I should really try to use it. But but don't be. People shouldn't be afraid to use it. One other thing I do want to get out is just for our audience, our viewers, is that if you have a topic that you'd love us to touch on, please let us know.
We really appreciate everybody's comments and insights, and we really appreciate everybody that watches. You guys really mean a lot to us, and we love that you watch us, and we try to be consistent in having great topics for you and great guests, and I think Colette has done that for us today, and we really, really appreciate that. You've given us a lot of things to think about, and we will have a lot of resources for our viewers as well, and we greatly appreciate that. We all are.
How often do you guys do this hangout?
Once a month.
Okay.
Usually the first Friday of the month.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well,
and
thank you.
We have some really exciting things coming up, so please keep watching.
Yeah. And let me know, because I will post those to my groups and post those on my site as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and then I would like to chat with you guys about the potential podcast sponsorship too.
Sure. So that sounds great.
Yep.
Lisa, any last words?
No, I've enjoyed myself today. I love picking your brain, Colette. I mean, when we met before, it was to do the podcast and to get the backstory, or more of the backstory from you, and the technical side of how you set that up is, great. And I know there are other virtual assistants or virtual service providers out there that have wanted to or are researching that. So we were glad to have you on to share that information with us.
Yep. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we're at the end of our time. Colette, hang in there because we're going to stop the broadcast, but hang in there, don't go anywhere.
Okay.
And we thank our viewers once again. We appreciate you so much. And remember to go onto our site and the next information, please.
www.va2va.com. And that's two.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.